Chapter 256, Evacuation 1. Early the next morning, the Phantom team woke before dawn. After a quick wash-up, everyone checked their equipment and began preparing breakfast. Lee Kixuan was woken by the soft murmur of conversation around him and the mouth-watering aroma of food in the air. When he opened his eyes, he saw Zyro Kai and Feng Yun stirring a pot, while Qin Luzi and Jin Zuyan were busy wrapping dumplings. He sat in a daze for a while, slowly remembering that he had joined a mercenary team and was no longer alone. Rubbing his face, he tried to clear the lingering drowsiness. When he lowered his hand, he noticed a basin of water with a set of washing items in front of him. Looking up, he saw the young woman smile at him and say, "Brother, these are for you. Wash up, then come eat with us." Lee Kixuan accepted the items and watched her skip away happily. He couldn't understand why she treated him so kindly when they had just met yesterday. The way she spoke to him felt oddly familiar, like they had known each other for a long time. After giving the items to Lee Kixuan, Zhao Lijai went to find her boyfriend. Seeing him wrapping dumplings skillfully, she said, "Brother Yan, I want 10 vegetable dumplings and 10 meat dumplings." Jin Zuyan glanced at her and asked, "Will 20 dumplings be enough for you?" As ability users, their appetites were far greater than ordinary people's, especially dual ability users. Since everyone in their team was an ability user, the dumplings were larger, and they made more than usual. Besides egg porridge, they had made dumplings with both vegetable and meat fillings. A hearty breakfast like this would give them the strength needed to fight zombies later. "It's enough, I want porridge too," Zhao Lijai nodded. "Okay," Jin Zuyan replied. An hour later, breakfast was finally ready. Sitting in a circle, 5 large iron pots were placed in the center. 2 pots of porridge, 2 pots of dumplings, and 1 pot filled with milk. Everyone eyed the milk with curiosity until Zyro Kai finally asked, "Captain, where did this milk come from?" "It's from the husbandry area. Aitg and I found several tanks of milk in the warehouse. Since it was still good, we just brought some back," Jin Zuyan replied casually, scooping a large bowl of dumplings for his girlfriend. Hearing this, Lee Kixuan smiled and asked, "So, Captain's girlfriend is also a space-type ability user?" Since Jin Zuyan had accepted him into the team, he knew it was only a matter of time before Lee Kixuan learned about Zhao Lijai's space ability. Rather than trying to hide it, he decided to let things unfold naturally. And as expected, Lee Kixuan had figured it out after just one day. His powers of observation were impressive. While Jin Zuyan remained calm, the rest of the team, including Zhao Lijai, turned to look at him, awaiting his response. After a moment, he looked at them and said, "What are you all doing? Not eating?" Everyone understood that their captain had silently acknowledged Zhao Lijai's ability. Lee Kixuan chuckled and said, "Captain, thank you for trusting me. Since you have joined my team, you are one of my people. Trust the ones you use, that's my principle. If I didn't trust you, I wouldn't have let you join in the first place," Jin Zuyan replied. Hearing this, the rest of the team realized just how serious their captain was about accepting Lee Kixuan. Qin Luzi, in particular, was struck by his words. With a quiet sigh, he decided to give the new member a chance to prove himself. With that change in mindset, he stopped scrutinizing Lee Kixuan so closely and returned to his usual aloof self. Sitting across from him, Zyro Kai nudged Feng Yun and whispered with curiosity, "Brother Yun, did you notice that Brother Qin stopped watching the new guy?" Feng Yun held his bowl tighter as it almost fell from the nudge and said helplessly, "Zyro Kai, stop paying attention to Brother Qin's business. If you keep running your mouth carelessly, you will get punished." Just after he finished his words, Lee Sikai sat down beside them and said, "Old Qin is strict but not unreasonable. As long as you don't cross his bottom line, he is actually pretty lenient and gentle. He is just a bit awkward when it comes to having contact with people." "Brother Sikai," Feng Yun greeted him politely. "You two are still growing, eat more," Lee Sikai said as he handed them 2 large cups of milk. Taking the cup, Zyro Kai said, "Brother Sikai, I stopped growing ages ago. If I keep growing, I will end up a 2-meter giant." Lee Sikai glanced at him and replied, "Your height is average on our team. You should grow a few more centimeters so you don't drag down our height advantage against Old Wei's team." Zyro Kai pouted in frustration the moment he heard his words. Even if he was average on their team, he was still 180 centimeters tall. It wasn't like he was short. Thinking this, he turned to Feng Yun and asked, "Brother Yun, how tall are you?" 181.7 centimeters, Feng Yun answered casually. "You are just a student, how can you be that tall?" Xirokai asked in disbelief. My family's genes are good. I was born tall and handsome, he replied matter-of-factly. Hearing such shameless words, Xirokai was left speechless. After a moment he muttered, Indeed, when you are close to a cinnabar, you are stained red. When you are close to ink, you turn black. Brother Yun, you learn bad things from the captain. At that, both Li Sikai and Feng Yun laughed, but didn't bother teasing him any further. They quickly finished their breakfast and began cleaning up. Once they finished packing up, the team gathered around. Jin Zuyan stood in front of them and said, Yesterday, I received information from Zun Qi. Chapter 257, Evacuation 2. Jin Zuyan looked at everyone and continued calmly. A zombie horde was spotted near the Linen City border. The location is close to Wei Wying's camp, so we will head there to investigate. Since we don't yet know the exact situation, we will divide into 2 teams. After a brief pause, he continued, Zhai, Old Qin, Kixuan, Wenmo, and Wenkai will come with me to scout the horde. The rest will follow Old Zhang and assist the Eagle team with evacuating survivors. Any questions? No, Captain, the members responded in unison. Checking his watch, Jin Zuyan said, We leave in 5 minutes. Understood. After exiting the suburban area, Feng Yun took out the armored vehicles from his space. Since she no longer needed to conceal her space, Zhao Lijai took out 5 buses and 2 trucks she had collected along the road previously from her space. Then, she stored away the extra armored vehicles into her space, leaving only one for their use. They fueled up the vehicles and boarded the buses and trucks. Before departure, Jin Zuyan turned to Zhang Yuan and said, Old Zhang, I'm leaving the team in your hands while I'm gone. Contact me if anything urgent comes up. Zhang Yuan nodded and replied, Understood, be careful. Jin Zuyan gave his shoulder a firm pat before he went into the armored car. This time, Wenkai was driving, with Qin Luzi in the passenger seat serving as the navigator. Jin Zuyan and the rest sat in the back with Zhao Lijai by his side, and Li Kixuan and Wenmo across from them. Once they left the narrow road behind, the team headed straight for the border. At the same time, Wei Wying and his team had been waiting at the base entrance for a while before they saw Zun Qi's team drive 5 buses and 5 trucks over. Seeing them waiting, one of the soldiers said, Captain Wei, sorry for making you wait. Wei Wying nodded and said, It's not early anymore, we have to leave now. Understood. After a brief exchange, Wei Wying entered the car and they drove away. Since the road had been cleared up and fixed by Zun Qi's team, it only took them 4 hours to reach the survivor camp. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when they arrived. Seeing the familiar car, the guards quickly moved the roadblocks and greeted them. When they saw the buses and trucks, they thought they would come back with reinforcements. Therefore, when they noticed the buses and trucks were emptied, their hearts sank. Wei Wying rolled down the window and asked, Have the survivors been informed of the evacuation? One of the soldiers nodded and replied, Vice Captain Zyro already informed everyone, and we have made the preparations. At this moment, the survivors have been moved to the field and are just waiting for your order. Hearing this, Wei Wying nodded and said, Inform everyone to prioritize the elderly, children, and women. We will evacuate them first and come back for the rest. Understood, the soldier nodded and quickly went to convey the order. While Zun Qi's team waited outside to organize the evacuation, Wei Wying and his team entered the camp. They drove directly to the main building and walked to the temporary office. Not long after he took his seat and read the report, the door of his office was pushed open, and several leaders entered with darkened faces. Hearing their footsteps, Wei Wying didn't even bother to raise his head and asked, For all of you to come here at the same time, is there an urgent matter? When the leaders saw his nonchalant attitude, one of them frowned and said, Captain Wei, what do you mean by prioritizing the elderly, children, and women? Shouldn't you evacuate the leaders and important people first? After he said this, another one chimed in, They are sick and weak. Even if you evacuate them, they wouldn't be able to contribute anything to the camp or people. We should focus on the bigger picture and not be bound by old rules. Wei Wying's hand stopped when he heard his words. After a moment, he finally raised his head and asked, Colonel, are you telling me to abandon the civilians and focus on saving you all first? Captain Wei, you know the chance for the children, women, and elderly to survive in our current situation is very low. Rather than wasting resources on a lost cause, we should focus on grooming more people to increase our combat power, the colonel replied with a frown. Hearing this, Wei Wying stood up and said, "Colonel, as soldiers, we vowed to protect our country. Without the country, we have no home. People are the foundation of our country. You telling me to abandon the people is equal to asking me to destroy my home, my country." Taking a deep breath to calm down, he continued, "I won't change my decision. Either you leave by yourself or wait until we evacuate all the people." The leaders were angry with his reply, and one of them said, "Wei Wying, do you think we want to stay if we can leave by ourselves? Since you think my decision is wrong and you don't want to stay, then you are free to return to the capital. You can take your soldiers with you, but my team won't escort you," Wei Wying replied firmly. The moment he said this, the leaders' faces turned red with anger. The colonel pointed at him and said, "Wei Wying, are you going to rebel? Do you have to force us to give a military order before you listen?" As soon as he heard these words, Wei Wying finally recalled Jin Zuyan's words. He had stubbornly refused to listen to his advice and had firmly held on to his belief all this time. But today, he finally realized that the so-called government and country had collapsed on the day the zombies appeared. He shook his head and let out a chuckle. "What are you laughing about?" the colonel asked with a frown. Chapter 258, Evacuation 3. Looking at the colonel, Wei Wying took off his military jacket and his military emblem. He placed them on the table and said coldly, "From today onwards, I'm no longer a soldier. You can't use military law to punish me." As soon as he said this, his team members were shocked and exclaimed, "Captain, since I'm not a soldier, you don't have any right to order me. Right now, this camp is under my control. You only have two choices. Follow my order or pack up and leave," Wei Wying said firmly. The leaders were shocked by his sudden decision. The Phantom team had retired, and they couldn't afford to lose another high-ranking team anymore. Seeing that Wei Wying was serious, the colonel thought for a moment and softened his tone. "Captain Wei, we can discuss anything. There is no need to say those words. I will treat it as if you said nothing. Let's forget what happened today." Knowing how shameless these old foxes were, Wei Wying ignored his attempt to reconcile and said, "Colonel, I still have lots of work to do. If you have nothing else, please leave." The colonel glared at him. Even after he lowered his head, this man was still unwilling to change his mind. It seemed that they couldn't control him anymore. With a snort, the leaders turned and left the office. Not long after they left, they met with Gu Shao's and Rong Mo outside. Seeing the leaders' bad expressions, Gu Shao's smiled and asked, "Colonel, are you leaving already?" The colonel raised his chin and said, "It's none of your business." Gu Shao's shook his head and said, "Colonel, if you and your people decide to leave, you better leave as soon as possible." Hearing this, the colonel asked with doubts, "What do you mean by that?" "I received new information that the zombies started to move toward our direction. If nothing happens, they will reach this camp in 3 days, Gu Shao's replied. When they heard his words, the leaders' faces turned pale, and they quickly left, not even saying a word. After they took several steps, Gu Shao's added, I almost forgot to tell you. The number of zombies has reached more than 8,000. This time, our chance of survival is nearly 0. With his words, the leaders no longer walked, but already ran away. Looking at their backs, Rong Mo glanced at her boyfriend and said, "Shao's, you are so bad." Gu Shao's held his girlfriend's waist and replied with a chuckle, "Those old men ran faster than rats. It's good if they really leave so as not to bring more trouble to us." After a moment of silence, Rong Mo asked, "Did the zombies really amount to 8,000 by now?" "No, I lied to them," Gu Shao said with a smile. "More, do you want to go to Zun Chi's base to take a look? Maybe your family is there," he asked. Rong Mo thought for a moment and said, "My brother's office is located not far from that area. I want to go and take a look." "Okay, then we will go with Captain Wei," Gu Shao nodded. After the two of them made a decision, they went to find Wei Wying to discuss the evacuation. At the same time, the soldiers were busy arranging people to board the trucks and buses according to the list. Since they had limited vehicles, the buses and trucks were filled to the brim. An hour later, a total of 8 buses and 7 trucks were full of people. Standing at the entrance of the camp, the men looked at their families with a smile, while the elderly, children and women were crying as they watched their families stay behind. Despite the gloomy atmosphere of separation, Zyro Han walked toward Zun Chi's team members and said, "Comrade, this is the name list of the survivors." Taking the list, the soldier nodded and said, "We will return tomorrow to pick up more survivors." "Okay, be careful on the road," Zyro Han nodded. Just after they boarded the buses and trucks, another group of vehicles arrived. Seeing this, Zyro Han frowned and waited for them. As the group parked their buses and trucks, Zhang Yuan came out of the leading truck. The moment Zyro Han saw him, his eyes lit up and he walked to him in a large stride. Standing 3 feet from him, he gave him a salute and greeted him with a smile, "Comrade Zhang." Zhang Yuan returned the salute and said, "My captain sent us over to help with the evacuation." "That's great, with 7 more vehicles, we can evacuate more people," Zyro Han said excitedly. "Comrade Zyro, we won't go inside. Let's not waste time and progress faster," Zhang Yuan said while checking his watch. "Okay." Zyro Han quickly went to inform the soldiers, and they arranged more people. With the addition of the Phantom team escorting the survivors, the soldiers finally heaved a sigh of relief. Another hour passed before everyone boarded. Before leaving, Zhang Yuan turned to Chen Qianfeng and Feng Yun and said, "Qianfeng, Feng Yun, the 2 of you stay behind. Help them cover the water and food during the evacuation process." Understood. After giving some instructions, the Phantom team left with Zun Qi's team and returned to the base. Not long after they left, Chen Qianfeng looked at Zyro Han and asked, "Comrade Zyro, where is the warehouse area? We brought some supplies and water." Hearing this, Zyro Han looked at their empty hands and asked, "Comrade Chen, where are the supplies?" Feng Yun waved his hand, and a pile of instant noodles appeared in front of him. He pointed at the supplies and said, "It's in my space." Afterward, he collected the supplies back into his space. Glancing at the thin, depressed survivors, he said, "Let's divide the supplies first." Hearing this, Zyro Han regained his senses and said, "Oh, this way please." Chapter 259, Scouting. As he led them to the camp, Zyro Han was surprised that the Phantom team had gained another space-type ability user. The last time he met them, he only knew that Zyro Kai was the space-type ability user. Today, he met another one. He glanced at Feng Yun and noticed that he didn't seem like a trained soldier, but from how he walked and acted, he didn't seem like a simple person either. While the 2 of them went to the warehouse area, Jin Zuyan and his team had already reached the border. Before they even crossed the border, Qin Luzi's expression turned solemn. He checked the map in his mind and said, "Captain, there are 2 groups of zombies within a 500-meter radius in the left and right directions." "Can you estimate the number?" Jin Zuyan asked. "It should be around 3,000 on the left side and more than 5,000 on the right side, but the number is just a rough calculation," Qin Luzi replied after a moment. As the car crossed the border, he added, "Captain, the number is more than my prediction. It seems that we need a full team to clear them out." Jin Zuyan thought for a moment and said, "Today, we only came to scout the situation." Wen Kai continued driving. Understood, Wen Kai nodded and stepped on the pedal. Sitting in the passenger seat, Qin Luzi's frown deepened. When they were 10 kilometers away from the border, he suddenly said, "Stop." As soon as he said this, Wen Kai stepped on the brake and parked the car in the middle of the road. He turned to look at Qin Luzi and asked, "Luzi, what's wrong?" "There is a zombie horde 500 meters in front. The number of zombies far exceeds our prediction," he replied. After a moment of pause, he turned to look at Jin Zuyan and added, "Captain, the number of zombies has reached 30,000 and keeps growing. Mixed in the horde, there are 2 level 4 zombies and more than 50 level 3 zombies." This time, Jin Zuyan's expression turned solemn after hearing his words. After a moment, he said, "We will come back to clear up this group later. Wen Kai, go to the left. The location of the other 2 groups is too close to the camp. We have to clear them up first." Understood, Wen Kai nodded and turned the car. 30 minutes later, the car stopped on the roadside, and they got out. Zhao Lijai stored the armored vehicle into her space before she handed a backpack to each of them. When she handed a backpack to Li Kixuan, she said, "Brother, there are some crystal cores inside. When you run out of energy, just use them." Li Kixuan looked at her for a while before he said, "Okay, thank you, little sister." Zhao Lijai smiled and walked back to her boyfriend's side. They pulled out their airguns as they walked toward the horde. 15 minutes later, they finally saw the zombies. As the zombies let out roars, some of them were killing each other. The winners ate the losers' brains and continued to fight. Looking at them, Zhao Lijai felt a chill run down her spine. The situation of the zombies was similar to how ancient people trained goo insects. The last winner would be the strongest and the most poisonous. If the zombie situation was like the goo insects, then she couldn't imagine how strong the last standing zombie would be. Perhaps this was how the zombie commander was born in her previous life. Noticing her change in mood, Jin Zuyin squeezed her hand lightly and said, "Don't worry. As long as we kill them all, nothing will happen." Zhao Lijai snapped out of her thoughts and nodded. When they were 20 meters away from the zombies, the Wen brothers raised their hands and created a metal platform 10 meters in diameter and 5 meters tall. They bent their knees and with a jump stood on top of the platform. As the wind carried their scent away, the zombies finally noticed their presence. Turning around, the zombies let out roars and rushed toward them. Standing on the platform, Zhao Lijai aimed her airgun at the zombies below and started firing.
Pop, pop, pop. Crack, crack, crack. Raw.
The sound of skulls pierced by metal bullets mixed with the roars of zombies. As the team started killing, Li Kixuan watched them for a moment before he took out his metal fan. With a flick of his wrist, the fan unfolded. He glanced at them and shook his head. He had thought this team was strong and decided to join them. In the end, they were just like the others, dependent on their guns. Unwilling to waste more time, he waved his fan, and a red flame dragon burst out. The flame dragon flew toward the zombies and burned every zombie it touched. While the zombies were covered in fire, they didn't know pain or fear. Despite their limbs and bodies being broken from the flames, they continued crawling toward the metal platform. Standing beside his girlfriend, Jin Zuyin glanced at Li Kixuan for a second and frowned. His ability in this life was too weak compared to his previous life. From what he knew, Li Kixuan was one of the ability users who awakened their abilities a few days before the apocalypse. His fire-type ability was also a high-grade blue flame, so it was impossible for him to have the lowest-grade fire-type now. While he was thinking, Li Kixuan put away his metal fan and raised his hand. In less than 2 seconds, a huge fireball appeared in front of him. As the temperature around him rose, Zhao Lijai and Jin Zuyin turned around and noticed the blue flame at the center of the fireball. Boom! The next moment, Li Kixuan threw the fireball at the zombies. The fireball flew at high speed and exploded upon contact, killing more than 50 zombies instantly and leaving a deep hole in the ground. Chapter 260, Wrong Perception. Due to the sound of the explosion, more zombies were attracted to their direction. Seeing this, Qin Luzi said, "Wenmo, you should make an airgun for him too. If he keeps going, he will attract all the zombies in this area." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Kixuan looked at him and asked, "Brother, isn't it faster to kill them with our ability?" "It's fast, but it's noisy. We don't use our abilities unless it's unavoidable," Qin Luzi replied. When he heard this, Li Kixuan's eyes flickered for a moment. He looked at them and noticed they didn't show any fear or anxiety despite being trapped on this platform, surrounded by zombies. "It seems that I was wrong about them," he thought inwardly. Jin Zuyin observed the situation for a moment and said, "Everyone, use your abilities. We have to speed up and clear the group on the right side before dark." As soon as he gave the order, the members nodded and holstered their guns. The next moment, Qin Luzi suddenly leaped from the platform. Li Kixuan was surprised by his sudden action and said, "What are?" But before he could say another word, he saw Qin Luzi fly away and float above the zombies, 50 meters from the platform. This was the first time he had ever seen someone actually fly in his entire 24 years of life. As he floated in midair, Qin Luzi snapped his fingers, and several areas above the zombies exploded suddenly. Booms, 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 boom. With one move, he cleared hundreds of zombies. Seeing this, the Wen brothers shook their heads and said in unison, "Showing off again." As they said this, Wen Kai created a huge ball of metal, while Wenmo clasped his hands and turned the ball into countless metal needles. The needles were 10 centimeters long with diameters less than 0.5 centimeters. They were sharp and glistened under the sunlight. With a wave of his hand, the needles flew toward the zombies like a swarm of bees. Stab, 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 stab. The sound of metal piercing zombies' skulls echoed through the area. Wenmo continued controlling the metal needles, while Wen Kai used 2 airguns to keep shooting. Raw. As the number of zombies decreased rapidly, a level 3 zombie let out a roar and jumped toward the metal platform. Saying this, Jin Zuyin said, "Leave it to me." In the next moment, he bent his knees and leaped toward the zombies while unsheathing his longsword. Clangs, boom. The sound of metal colliding echoed in the area as his longsword met the zombies' sharp claws. A wave of energy burst out at the point of contact, blowing away nearby zombies into pieces. Both of them were pushed back by the shockwave and fell to the ground. With a flip in midair, Jin Zuyin landed lightly on the ground, while the zombie crashed down with a loud thud, leaving a deep crack under its feet.
Zra!
Standing on the metal platform, Zhao Lijai saw zombies rushing toward her boyfriend from all sides. Seeing this, she waved her hands, and 2 water blades shot toward them at high speed.
Crack, crack, crash.
In less than 3 seconds, the water blades beheaded several zombies pouncing at Jin Zuyin. With her covering his back, Jin Zuyin could focus on fighting the level 3 zombie. While protecting her boyfriend, Zhao Lijai also kept an eye on the others. When she saw a level 2 zombie jump onto the platform and lunge at Wen Kai's back, she raised her hand.
Clang!
Before the zombie's sharp claw could pierce Wen Kai's back, an ice shield appeared out of nowhere, blocking the attack. Noticing the sudden attack, Wen Kai turned and drew his blade.
Zra!
The zombie roared and tried to pull back its hand. Unfortunately, before it could free itself, the ice shield transformed into ice needles that burrowed into its body. As they did, the zombie's body was gradually covered in ice, rendering it immobile. Taking advantage of the opening, Wen Kai swung his blade and chopped off the zombie's head in one smooth motion. After killing it, he returned to shooting the zombies below. Not far from them, Li Kixuan finally realized that his new team was not only much stronger than he had thought, they also had a deep, tacit understanding of one another. Their teamwork was flawless, and they covered each other's weaknesses seamlessly. While killing zombies and protecting her boyfriend, Zhao Lijai noticed her vice-captain standing still, watching them fight with a deep frown. Thinking that it might be because it was still early in the apocalypse and he wasn't used to the gore scene yet, she moved closer to him and asked, "Brother, are you okay?" Li Kixuan noticed the hint of worry in her voice and asked teasingly, "Little sister, your boyfriend is fighting a high-level zombie over there, and you are worrying about another man here." Zhao Lijai blinked and replied, "My boyfriend is very strong, he will be fine. But brother, are you okay? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? If you feel nauseous, just vomit it out. Holding it back will make you feel worse." When he heard her words, Li Kixuan was speechless. He thought, "Little sister, are you saying I'm weak, so you came over to check on me?" Seeing that he said nothing, Zhao Lijai unzipped her backpack and handed him a bottle of water while saying, "Brother, if you are tired, drink some water and take a rest. We will take care of the rest." Before Li Kixuan could respond, she had already turned around and resumed killing zombies. Holding the water in his hand, he looked at her back and burst out laughing. It took a while for him to calm down. Lowering his head, he let out a sigh and muttered, "She is more interesting than I thought." When he raised his head again, his eyes flashed with killing intent as he said coldly, "I wonder what her reaction would be if she saw her boyfriend die in front of her." Chapter 261, Sickly Gentleman. 2 hours later, Jin Zuyin and his team finally cleared out all of the zombies in the area. With a wave of his hand, he burned all the zombies' corpses, leaving black ashes behind. Since Zyro Kai was not present, Zhao Lijai was the one who collected the crystal cores. For an unknown reason, she noticed that the number of crystal cores appearing in the zombies was higher than usual. While she was feeling doubtful and uneasy, she still welcomed the unexpected gain. Standing beside her, Jin Zuyin smiled when he saw his girlfriend grinning like a cat that had successfully stolen a fish. He patted her head gently and said, "We will get more later." Zhao Lijai nodded and said, "Brother Yan, let's finish the task and go back."
Okay.
Before leaving, Wenmo waved his hand, and the metal platform was turned into 2 air guns, several cartridges, magazines, and countless metal bullets. He handed the cartridges to Qin Luzi and filled the magazines with metal bullets. Li Kixuan watched them with interest and asked, "Brother Wenmo, since Brother Wen Kai can create metal, why not use new metal?" Wenmo looked at him with disapproval and said, "According to our ancestors' teaching, wasting resources is a sin. Recycle if you can." Li Kixuan thought of countless reasons, but he never expected that the reason was as simple as this. They were stingy. In the midst of his chuckles, the team rode the armored vehicles and went in the opposite direction. They needed to clear out one more zombie horde before they could go to Wei Wang's camp. At the same time, Zhang Yuan and his team had already reached the Linen University area when they saw a man leaning on a car door. Zhou Huajian noticed the man's car was emitting white smoke. It seemed that his car had broken down. He picked up his walkie-talkie and said, Vice Captain, there is a man up front. It seems that his car is broken. Should we stop and check on him? Receiving the message, Zhang Yuan leaned out the window to check the situation. Seeing the man was pale and looked sickly, he said, "Let's check on him first." Understood. After receiving his vice captain's order, Zhou Huajian slowed down the bus and stopped a few meters from the man. He leaned out the window and asked, "Comrade, do you need any help?" Hearing his voice, the man raised his head, and his deep, sharp eyes met his. Zhou Huajian was startled by how sharp his gaze was. This sharp gaze didn't match his pale, sickly appearance. He thought the young man wouldn't respond and considered leaving. But before he could step on the gas pedal, the young man pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket, coughed a few times, and then said, "Comrade, my car is broken. Can you give me a ride to the nearest camp?" When he heard his voice, Zhou Huajian thought of a gentle young master from ancient times. His speech was slow but firm. Despite his coughing, his breath was steady. The moment these thoughts flashed through his mind, he knew that something was off with this young man. After hesitating for a moment, he opened the door and said, "Come up." Before heading to the bus, the young man opened the car door and took out a backpack. Judging from the size, the backpack must contain his supplies. The young man climbed into the bus and said with a smile, "Thank you, comrade." Zhou Huajian closed the door and continued to drive. Since the bus was crowded, he said, "Come and sit in the front." Hearing this, the young man didn't refuse and walked to the front. As he sat on the stairs beside the driver's seat, several young women looked at him with disappointment. They thought that even if the man looked sickly, he was handsome and seemed capable. If they could squeeze in next to him and let him hug them, he might feel something for them. Then they could depend on him and no longer worry about not having supplies. Not knowing that he had ruined several people's plans, Zhou Huajian glanced at the young man and said, "Brother, you look so young. Are you a university student?" The young man smiled and replied, "Yeah." "What's your name?" Zhou Huajian asked again. This time, the young man didn't reply and looked at him with a gentle smile. After a moment of silence that made Zhou Huajian feel awkward, he finally said, "My name is Mo Junji." Hearing this, Zhou Huajian silently let out the breath he was holding and said, "Oh, my name is Zhou Huajian." After he said this, he heard Mo Junji cough a few times and couldn't help but ask, "Brother, are you okay? If you are sick, I can help you find a doctor when we arrive at the base later." Mo Junji covered his mouth and let out another cough before he said, "It's fine. A doctor can't help me." The moment he heard this, Zhou Huajian felt a pang of pity, and his gaze softened when he glanced at him. He let out a sigh and said, "Brother, you are still young. You shouldn't give up on your life so easily. Maybe the doctor can find a solution and cure your illness." When he heard this, a flash of amusement flickered in Mo Junji's eyes. He knew that he looked sickly and on the brink of death, but he was far from death's door. After controlling his expression, he smiled and replied, "Brother Zhou, I'm not that young. I'm already 23 years old this year." Zhou Huajian was taken aback by his words and said, "We are the same age, but you look like you are only 20. Mo Junji smiled but said nothing. While the two of them were chatting, Pei Yijun was having an argument with his father at Jiangning City's base. Standing in front of his father's desk, he asked, "Father, what do you mean by that?" Chapter 262, A Crane Among the Chickens. Looking at his stubborn son, Pei Zun said with a sigh, "Yijun, you are no longer a kid. You should understand that the current situation is different from before. We will prepare for the zombie attack and continue recruiting the ability users to increase our base's strength. As for the matter of the zombie horde at the border, just let the linen side take care of it." The moment Pei Yijun heard his father's words, he felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at his father as if this was the first time he had known him. He clenched his fists tightly and asked, "Father, do you know that there are several survivor camps near the border?" "I know, Wei Wang mentioned it before," Pei Zun replied. Taking a deep breath, Pei Yijun asked again, "Since you know that there are several survivor camps on the border, then you must know the consequences of leaving the zombie horde uncontrolled, right?" Pei Zun looked at his son as if he were a fool and asked, "Yijun, what exactly do you want to say?" "Father, you clearly know that countless lives will be lost if the zombie horde moves toward Linen City's border and attacks the camps. Since we have the manpower and ability to help, why won't you help?" Pei Yijun asked. Pei Zun let out a long sigh, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said, "I have told you the matter is not as simple as that. Beside our base, there are at least 5 bases that stand at the same level as us. You saw it yourself. The number of zombies is at least 80,000. The chance of surviving the battle is lower than 5%. If we send our people to help, it is equal to cutting off our power. The moment our strength weakens, those bases won't let us off. Compared to those weak and old people, preserving our own people and territory is the priority. Even after hearing his father's explanation, Aitg still couldn't accept his father's view and replied angrily, "Father, those weak and old are human lives. They are not just a number." Angered by his son's behavior, Aitg slammed his hand on the desk and said, "Aitg, you better watch your attitude. Do you think I won't punish you just because you have your mother's protection?" "I'm no longer a child. I don't need anyone to protect me," Aitg shouted back. As soon as he said those words, the two of them stared at each other, neither willing to back down. After a long silence, Aitg took a deep breath and said, "Since you won't help, then I will help." The moment he said those words, he turned around and walked to the door. Seeing that his son was determined to leave, Aitg was furious. Standing up, he shouted, "Rebellious son, stop right there." Ignoring his father's words, Aitg pulled open the door. But before he could step out of the room, a man in his 30s blocked his way and said with a smile, "Young master, please calm down." Aitg looked at the man and said coldly, "Get out of the way." The man smiled at him but didn't move at all. Seeing this, Aitg reached out to push him away, but before he could touch him, the man raised his hand and said, "Young master, I'm sorry for offending you." Aitg frowned when he heard his words and said, "What are you?" But before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly felt dizzy and lost consciousness. As he fell to the ground, the man caught him and said, "Master, what should we do with the young master?" Aitg looked at his son coldly and said, "Send him back to his room and lock him up. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter or leave his room." The man nodded and replied, "Understood." After Aitg was taken away, Aitg walked to the large window and looked at the sky. His gaze was deep as he lost himself in thought. Despite the argument between the father and son, Zhang Yuan and his team finally arrived at Zun Qi's base in the afternoon. When the guards saw the buses and trucks from afar, one of them had already gone to inform Zun Qi. Therefore, when they parked the buses and cars at the base's entrance, Zun Qi and a group of soldiers were already waiting for them at the entrance. Seeing them come back safely, he walked over to Zhang Yuan's car and greeted him with a smile, "Comrade Zhang, welcome back." Zhang Yuan nodded at him and said, "Captain Zun, we brought back some of the survivors. Please help arrange people to manage them. We have to go back to pick up the rest." Hearing this, Zun Qi was taken aback and asked, "Comrade Zhang, your team didn't plan to take a rest first?" "My team still has to join my captain later to clean up the zombies, so we want to transport as many survivors as possible. The situation at the border can't be delayed any longer," Zhang Yuan replied. This time, Zun Qi nodded and said, "I will let my men manage the survivors. It might take 1 to 2 hours at most." "Okay," Zhang Yuan nodded. While the survivors were led to undergo inspections and registration, Mo Junji waited in line while observing the situation. Mixed among the survivors, he noticed that the soldiers treated a man with respect. Based on how he interacted with the team escorting the survivors, he must have held a high position in this place. Due to his tall height, he looked like a crane among chickens. Because of this, he attracted lots of attention. Noticing this, he took out his handkerchief, covered his lips, and coughed softly as he lowered his head. He thought that people would ignore him when he showed his weakness. Unexpectedly, while he was coughing with all his might, someone tapped his shoulder. Chapter 263, A Loss for the Human Race, 1. Turning around, Mo Junji saw Zhou Huajian smiling at him. After another cough, he took a deep breath and asked softly, "Brother Zhou, is something wrong?" Zhou Huajian patted his back for a moment before saying, "Brother, come with me. One of my teammates is a doctor. He can help check your condition." Hearing this, Mo Junji sighed and said, "Brother Zhou, it's no use." Seeing how easily he gave up on his life, Zhou Huajian frowned and said, "Brother, even if living is hard, you can't throw your life away so easily. Come with me and at least give it a try." After hesitating for a moment, Mo Junji finally nodded and stepped out of the line, following him to the tent. When they entered, the Phantom team members turned to look at them. Seeing a sickly, pale man coming in with one of their members, Gao Bohai stood up and walked over. Before Mo Junji could even introduce himself, Gao Bohai pulled him to the nearest chair and pushed him down to sit. The next moment, he opened his backpack and took out some medical tools. He first checked his blood pressure, then examined him using a stethoscope. The more he listened, the deeper his frown became. Standing beside them, Zhou Huijian asked, "Brother Bohai, how is he?" Gao Bohai took off his stethoscope and said, "There is nothing wrong with his lungs, but he might have anemia and malnutrition." Just after he said this, Mo Junji started coughing violently, nearly out of breath. Seeing this, Jiang Lixin said, "How about I give it a try?" Upon hearing this, they nodded and stepped back to make room. Jiang Lixin pulled a chair beside Mo Junji and sat down. As she reached out, she said, "Relax and don't struggle." At first, Mo Junji didn't understand what she meant, but the moment she pressed her fingers to his wrist, he was surprised to feel a flow of warm energy entering his body. Before his mind could process it, he instinctively used his own energy to push the warm flow out. But before the energy inside his body could clash with hers, he stopped himself and tried to relax. Jiang Lixin used her energy to examine his condition and noticed that his meridians and internal organs were wounded and marked with black spots, as if burned by chemicals. As her energy flowed inside him, it gradually healed the injuries in his meridians and organs. As the healing continued, Mo Junji's eyes widened in shock. The burning pain in his body eased under the flow of warm energy. He looked thoughtfully at the woman in front of him. After half an hour, Jiang Lixin's face had turned pale, and her forehead was covered with sweat. The moment she healed the last injury in his lungs, she let go of his wrist and let out a long sigh. Seeing his wife's pale face, Chen Ji placed 2 transparent crystals in her hand and said, "Wife, absorb some energy first." Jiang Lixin nodded and closed her eyes to recover while her husband gently wiped away her sweat. "Thank you, sister," Mo Junji said after a moment of silence. Noticing that his complexion was no longer pale, but now held a hint of rosiness, Zhou Huijian asked, "Brother, how are you feeling?" Taking a deep breath, Mo Junji smiled and said, "I feel much better now." 10 minutes later, Jiang Lixin finally recovered her energy and opened her eyes. After drinking some water, she asked, "Comrade, your body's condition is very strange. There were many burn-like injuries in your internal organs and meridians." Everyone was taken aback when they heard this. "Comrade, when did you first fall ill?" Jiang Lixin asked. Mo Junji shook his head and said, "It should have been at the beginning of this year, around February." Hearing this, Jiang Lixin said in disbelief, "Judging by your body's condition, you shouldn't have survived more than 2 months. After she spoke, Shen Jinj asked, "Is it possible that his condition is caused by his ability?" At his question, everyone turned to look at Mo Junji. Using his handkerchief to wipe away sweat, he hid his surprise. After a moment, he shook his head and said with a smile, "Comrade, if I had an ability, my body wouldn't have ended up like this." Considering his condition, they found his answer reasonable. Suddenly, Mo Junji began coughing again. Seeing this, Zhou Huijian asked, "Brother, why are you coughing again?" Too busy coughing to answer, Mo Junji could only shake his head. Sensing something was wrong, Jiang Lixin used her energy to check again. The moment she saw black spots reappearing on his meridians, she said in shock, "Why did the black spots return again?" Hearing this, Gao Bohai said, "Sister-in-law, maybe your healing can only temporarily relieve his condition." As they thought of this possibility, Zhang Yuan said, "I will contact Captain and ask if we can let him stay with us. Even if the healing is only temporary, it's better than letting his condition worsen." When Mo Junji heard this, he said, "Comrade, it's all right. I know my own condition well. There is no need to trouble sister." Yu Faiyan frowned at his words. The moment he saw this man, he felt a sense of familiarity. After thinking for a long time, he finally asked, "Comrade, are you Mo Junji?" Hearing this, Mo Junji looked at him and replied, "Do you know me?" His words were as good as confirming his identity. Yu Faiyan stood up in excitement and said, "Senior Mo, it's really you." "Faiyan, you know him?" Zhang Yuan asked. Everyone knows Mo Junji. He is a genius in the research field. At age 20, he received a Nobel Prize for his work on DNA-based nanotechnology. Yu Faiyan replied, nearly breathless with excitement. Stunned by the reaction, Mo Junji didn't know what to say. Though he was called a genius, he had never had friends, as most of his time had been spent in the lab. While others admired him, they were also jealous of his achievements. Chapter 264, A Loss for Human Race, 2. Mo Junji had long grown used to being ostracized by his peers, so when someone openly admired him like this, he didn't know how to react. Before he could speak, Zhang Yuan said, "It would be a loss for the human race if a genius like him died from illness. I will contact the captain now and inform him of the situation. Sister Jiang, Brother Bohai, we will leave his health in your hands." "Vice Captain, don't worry, we will do our best to help him," both replied in unison. After the decision was made, Zhang Yuan went to make a call using the satellite phone, while the rest of the team surrounded Mo Junji, offering him water and food and checking on his well-being. Without even being able to refuse, he unknowingly was added to the team. Outside the tent, Zhang Yuan was making a phone call. After several tries, the call finally connected, and the sound of zombies roaring came from the other side. Noticing this, he asked, "Captain, are you killing zombies?" On the other side, Jin Zuyan raised his hand and threw a huge black fireball toward the zombie crowd below, burning them as he said, "Did something happen?" Hearing his captain's casual tone, Zhang Yuan knew the situation on the other side was under control. "Captain, on our way to the base, we found a sickly man. After we brought him back, we learned that he is a genius in the research field," he said. "His condition is weird, and Sister Jiang's ability could only heal him temporarily. He is a valuable asset to humanity, and I want to recommend him to join our team." "What's his name?" Jin Zuyan asked. "Mo Junji." The moment he heard the name, memories of his past life flashed through Jin Zuyan's mind. Recalling the young man's condition and his contribution to the human race in the previous timeline, a flicker of surprise passed through his eyes. After a moment he said, "Permission granted." Zhang Yuan had thought he would need to persuade his captain more to accept Mo Junji. After all, their team was a mercenary group focused primarily on combat power. He didn't expect the captain to agree so easily. It seemed his captain truly was someone generous and appreciative of talent. "Thank you, Captain." After the brief conversation, Zhang Yuan hung up and returned to the tent. As he entered, he heard Mo Junji coughing again. It seemed that even with Jiang Lixin's healing ability, a complete cure wasn't possible. Taking his seat, he said, "I have informed the captain, and he agreed to let Mo Junji join our team. From today onwards, he will be part of the research unit." The moment he said this, everyone was delighted, except Mo Junji, who hesitated. He had something to do, and it would be inconvenient for him to join a team. Thinking about his purpose in coming to the city, he wanted to refuse, but seeing how happy the team members were, he swallowed the words at the tip of his tongue and nodded instead. "That matter can wait," he thought inwardly. Now that Mo Junji was officially a member of the Phantom team, Ziro Kai no longer had to hold back. He quickly took out a pot of meat stew, grilled fish, a plate of stir-fried vegetables, a plate of fried eggs, and a big bowl of steamed rice from his space. He also brought out some orange juice and utensils and said, "Brother Mo, you should eat more so your body can recover faster." Looking at the home-cooked dishes, Mo Junji's earlier hesitation vanished. He swallowed and licked his lips before asking, "These are for me." Ziro Kai glanced at his lean frame and nodded, "You can eat as much as you want." The moment he heard this, Mo Junji picked up the chopsticks and the rice bowl. They thought he would scoop some rice into a smaller bowl, but unexpectedly he ate directly from the big bowl. He chewed the rice slowly, savoring the taste before trying the dishes. They watched him with wide eyes. At first, they had assumed that someone so ill wouldn't have much of an appetite. That was why Ziro Kai had taken out more dishes for him to choose from. But watching him eat now, they doubted whether he was even sick, as his appetite was bigger than a healthy person. If not for Jiang Lixin checking his condition personally, they might have thought he was faking it. Despite his speed in devouring the food, his movements were elegant, as if he were eating in a Michelin-starred restaurant rather than a small military tent. It only took him 20 minutes to finish everything. After drinking the last drop of orange juice, he let out a long sigh and said with satisfaction, "This is the best meal I have had in 3 weeks." Hearing this, the Phantom team members finally snapped out of their daze. Ziro Kai looked at Mo Junji's lean body and asked, "Brother, you eat so much but you are still so thin. Where does all the food go?" Mo Junji wiped his lips with a napkin and replied casually, "I have a high metabolism, so even if I eat a lot, I don't gain weight." Not long after he said this, Zun Qi entered the tent and said, "Comrade Zhang, everything had been arranged." Hearing this, Zhang Yuan stood up and said, "Captain Zun, I need to ask a favor." Comrade Zhang, feel free to speak, Zun Qi nodded. My team just accepted a new member. I would like to trouble you to help us register him under our team, Zhang Yuan said. Oh, what's his name? Zun Qi asked. Being mentioned, Mo Junji stood up and walked toward them. Standing in front of Zun Qi, he greeted him. Hello, Captain Zun. My name is Mo Junji. The moment he heard the name and saw his face, Zun Qi was stunned. He looked at him for a moment before saying, Comrade Mo, what brings you here? Chapter 265, Gu Sheo's Proposal 1. Hearing these words, Zhang Yuan asked curiously, You two know each other? I once attended Comrade Mo's seminar in the capital as a government representative 2 years ago. His research on nanotechnology helped improve our military weapons and armor, Zun Qi explained. Then he turned to Mo Junji and asked again, Comrade Mo, I thought you would have stayed in the capital. Mo Junji smiled and replied, I came to look for my cousin and met the team on the road. They saw my car was broken and brought me along. Cousin, do you need any help? We can post a missing person notice to help you find your cousin, Zun Qi offered. Thinking it wasn't a secret, Mo Junji nodded and replied, Then I will have to trouble you with that, Captain Zun. No problem at all, Zun Qi replied and handed him a paper and pen. Just give us your cousin's name and information. If we get any news, we will inform you. Thank you, Mo Junji nodded and wrote down the information. After he finished, he handed the paper to Zun Qi. With his help, Mo Junji was registered under the Phantom team. When he received his information tag, he finally learned the team's name. Phantom Team, a good name and one he was satisfied with. The tag resembles a military name tag made of stainless steel. It had his name, registration number, and general information, such as his status. Since he was now part of a team, the general information listed his team's name. For those without a team, the general information would display their status as ability users or commoners. After the registration was done, the Phantom team left the base, followed by Zun Qi's team members. When they found usable buses and trucks on the road, they pumped gas from the abandoned cars, filled the fuel tanks, and brought the vehicles back to the survivor camp. As the sun was setting on the western horizon, they finally arrived at the camp. The moment the guards saw them returning, they quickly moved the barricades and opened the gate. Seeing that the number of buses and trucks was greater than before, the guards heaved a sigh of relief. Not long after they entered the camp, some soldiers approached and said, Vice Captain Zhang, Captain Wei has prepared places for your team to stay the night. Please follow us. Zhang Yuan nodded and said, Okay. 10 minutes later, the buses and trucks were parked in an open field near the warehouse. After everyone disembarked, they followed the soldiers to several houses prepared for them. When they reached the houses, they saw Wei Wying and his team already waiting at the entrance. Seeing them approaching, Wei Wying became emotional. Even after meeting Feng Yun, he still couldn't fully believe that all the Phantom team members had survived the zombie horde. Now that he finally saw them in person, he walked over, gave Zhang Yuan a bear hug and said, It's really great that you all survived. It's great. Surprised by the sudden hug, Zhang Yuan stiffened slightly, but hearing Wei Wying's hoarse voice, he smiled and said, Old Wei, we are back. After a moment, Wei Wying let go of him and grinned, Welcome back, old Zhang. The soldiers around them, aware of the Phantom team's sacrifice during the zombie horde, looked at them with respect and admiration. Let's go inside. I have prepared the best house in this area for you and your team, Wei Wying said as he led the way. When they entered, they saw the house was clean and bright. Lamps were turned on, powered by a small generator. Seeing this, Zhang Yuan said, Thank you, old Wei. Wei Wying shook his head and replied, I should be the one thanking you and your team. If not for all of you, I wouldn't know what to do in this situation. I reached out to so many survivor camps and bases in nearby towns and cities, but no one was willing to help. Only your team and Captain Zun came to my aid, he added with a sigh. Zhang Yuan understood his frustration and disappointment. As a soldier, Wei Wying had a strong sense of duty and took his vows seriously. Even when facing life-and-death situations, he would choose to sacrifice himself to protect others. So when he was rejected by his comrades, who not only refused to help but revealed their greed and hunger for power, it was understandable that he would question his beliefs. Patting his shoulder, Zhang Yuan said, Old Wei, this is human nature. We can't force others to share our beliefs or mindset. All we can do is do our best and take responsibility for our own actions. As for the others, they will have to face the consequences of their decisions. Wei Wang sighed and said, I understand, but what they did, it chills the heart. How could they treat human lives as a mere number? As they chatted, they walked to the living room. Hearing their voices, Feng Yun walked out from the kitchen, while Chen Kai and Feng came down from the second floor. Seeing them, the two greeted, Vice Captain, Captain Wei. Zhang Yuan nodded at them and said, We will escort the rest of the survivors tomorrow. Captain will join us tonight. Understood. Since the sky had darkened and everyone was tired, Wei Wang didn't stay long and left with his team. Zun Qi's team members were staying in the neighboring house. Chen Kai and Feng had spent the whole day filling water tanks at the warehouse, while the soldiers distributed water to the people. After several rounds of draining his energy, he could feel he was on the verge of a breakthrough. So, as he filled another tank for his team to wash up, he continued absorbing water-type crystal cores given to him by Zhao Lijai. Before the tank was full, he suddenly felt the energy in his body spiraling out of control. Alarmed, he shouted, Huajian. Chapter 266, Gu Shao's Proposal 2. Hearing Chen Kai and Feng's shout, everyone rushed to the backyard. Zhou Huajian was shocked to see his friend had fainted and been enveloped in a ball of water. Kai and Feng, what's wrong with you? He asked, worry etched on his face. Fearing something bad had happened, he ran toward him. But just as he was about to reach out, someone said, You can't disturb him. Startled, Zhou Huajian stopped in his tracks and turned his head. He saw a young man and a young woman standing atop the wall. Recognizing them, he said, It's you two. Gu Shao's and Rong Mo leapt from the wall and landed lightly in the yard. They walked over to the Phantom team and stood a few meters away from Chen Kai and Feng. Why did you stop me? Zhou Huajian asked. Your friend is in the middle of a breakthrough. If you disturb him, the consequences could be dire, Gu Shao said calmly. How do you know? Zhou Huajian pressed. Because I have experienced it myself. I recently broke through and became a level 1 ability user, Gu Shao said with a smile. Surprised by his words, Zhou Huajian said, Congratulations, brother. Thank you. So what should we do now? Zhou Huajian asked. This time, Rong Mo replied, All we can do is wait and guard him until the breakthrough is complete. After hearing this, the Phantom team exchanged glances. Zhang Yuan then said, In that case, Brother Bohai and Sister Jiang will stay here to guard Kai and Feng. The rest of you will take turns watching the backyard. Understood, the members responded in unison. Once he was done giving instructions, Zhang Yuan turned to Gu Shao's and said, Comrade Gu, I didn't know you and your friend were staying here. We were planning to leave and search for my girlfriend's family, but because of the zombie horde, we decided to stay and help out, Gu Shao's replied. Zhang Yuan nodded in approval and said, Comrade Gu, thank you for lending a hand. When friends are in trouble, it's only natural to help. With those words, Gu Shao's had shifted their relationship from acquaintances to friends. Zhang Yuan noticed his intention but didn't refute it. Even in peaceful times, it was rare to meet people willing to help in dangerous situations, let alone in the apocalypse. Since Gu Shao's and his friend had no ill intent toward the Phantom team, it was fine to befriend them. More friends meant more allies. Zhang Yuan smiled and replied, Brother Gu, you are right. Hearing Zhang Yuan call him Brother Gu, Gu Shao smiled in turn and said, Brother Zhang, I would like to discuss something with you. Zhang Yuan nodded and said, Let's talk inside. Sitting in the living room, Zhang Yuan gestured for them to take a seat and asked, Brother Gu, what do you want to discuss with me? Before answering, Gu Shao's waved his hand, and suddenly a boy appeared beside him. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. Noticing their reactions, he said, Brother Zhang, this is Zheng Changchao. He is 14 years old and an ability user. His ability is stealth. While he can turn invisible, he still has body temperature and scent. Although his ability is useless against zombies, it's a great ability when facing other ability users. Hearing this, Zhang Yuan nodded and said, His ability is indeed unique. After laying the groundwork, Gu Shao's continued, Besides Changchao, there are 3 more children who have awakened their abilities, and 5 who haven't. Zhang Yuan thought for a moment, then said, Brother Gu, if you have something to tell me, you can say it directly. Gu Shao's smiled and said, Mo and I are looking for her family, so we will be traveling a lot. If possible, I would like you to accept the children into your team. As soon as he said this, Zheng Changchao spoke up. Brother, I don't want to join them, I want to follow you. Zhang Yuan observed the boy for a while before saying, I can't make that decision on my own. How about we wait until my captain returns and discuss the matter with him? No problem, we will be staying in the camp until the zombie horde situation is resolved, Gu Shaoz said with a nod. Having stated his purpose, he stood up and said, Brother Zhang, it's late. We won't bother you and your team any longer. Zhang Yuan nodded and saw them off. After they left, the Phantom team had already finished washing up and were preparing dinner. While some took turns guarding Chen Kai and Feng, the rest sat down to eat. At the same time, Jin Zuyan and his team were on their way back to the camp after clearing out the two zombie hordes. While he drove the car, his girlfriend slept in the passenger seat and the rest of the team napped in the back seats. He lowered the window and drove with one hand, leaning against the door. The drive back to the camp was peaceful, as the red moon was nowhere to be seen tonight. When they arrived at the gate, a guard walked over and said, Comrade, the gate has been closed. If you want to enter, you will have to wait until dawn. Hearing this, Jin Zuyan replied, Comrade, please inform your captain. Just tell him that Jin Zuyan is waiting for him at the gate. The moment the guard heard this, he nodded and said, Please wait a moment. After the guard went to report, Jin Zuyan stepped out of the car and stretched. While waiting, he leaned against the car and stared at his girlfriend's sleeping face through the windshield. Perhaps his gaze was too intense, because Zhao Lijai stirred from her sleep and opened her eyes, only to meet a pair of dark, deep eyes filled with intense emotions. Startled by his gaze, she sat up and blinked a few times. When she looked at him again, he was watching her with a gentle expression and asked with a smile, Girlfriend, why are you so startled? Did you have a nightmare? Chapter 267, Dangerous Breakthrough, 1. Zhao Lijai took another look at her boyfriend and didn't see anything wrong with him. Opening the car door, she stepped out and stretched her sore body, yawning. Rubbing her teary eyes, she asked hoarsely, Brother Yan, why are we waiting outside? Noticing her hoarse voice, Jin Zuyan took a bottle of water from his backpack. He opened the cap, handed it to her and said, Drink some water first. Zhao Lijai was indeed thirsty and drank half the bottle. We are waiting for Wei Wying, Jin Zuyan replied to her earlier question. Hearing this, Zhao Lijai looked around and noticed the shabby gate and the several barricades in front of them. Looking up at the 2-meter-tall wall, she said, With this kind of defense, the camp will be wiped out the moment a zombie horde arrives. Jin Zuyan nodded and said, Sun Qi made the right decision this time. Rather than taking a risk and evacuating at the last minute, it's better to move the people out immediately. Zhao Lijai nodded and asked, Brother Yan, after the people move to the base, will they come back here again? After the second rain, the situation will change drastically. If they stay here, they will be wiped out sooner or later. Jin Zuyan reached out and held her hand. While playing with her fingers, he replied casually, That will depend on how Wei Wying makes his choices. Just as he said that, the gate opened and the barricades were removed. Not long after, Wei Wying, followed by several others, came out of the camp. The moment he saw Jin Zuyan and his team, Wei Wying's eyes reddened. He strode toward him, arms outstretched, clearly intending to give him a bear hug. But before he could touch him, Jin Zuyan took a step back and said coldly, Only my girlfriend can hug me. Blocked from giving the hug, Wei Wying wasn't embarrassed at all. Grinning, he said, Captain Jin, it's great that you are alive. Jin Zuyan raised an eyebrow at his words and asked, Captain Wei, do you think I die that easily? Hearing this, everyone agreed with his words. Because of the conversations, Qin Luzi and the others woke up and came out of the car one after another. Wei Wying looked them over and was relieved to see they were unharmed. When his gaze landed on an unfamiliar face, he asked, Captain Jin, this is... Jin Zuyan glanced at Li Kixuan and said, My team's new member, Li Kixuan. Taking a few steps forward, Li Kixuan reached out his hand and said, Hello, comrade. From his demeanor, Wei Wying could tell he wasn't a soldier. He shook his hand briefly, then turned to Jin Zuyan and said, Captain Jin, when your team returned this afternoon, they also brought back a new member. Jin Zuyan nodded and said, I know. Noticing that Jin Zuyan had no intention of discussing his team further, Wei Wying said, Captain Jin, we have prepared a place for your team to rest. Zyro Han will show you the way. Thank you, Captain Wei. Please inform your men and the leaders to attend a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The situation at the border isn't as good as we thought. Jin Zuyan said as he opened the passenger door for Zhao Lijai. Hearing this, Wei Wang's expression turned solemn as he replied, "Understood." After everyone got into the car, including Zyro Han, Jin Zuyan drove toward the house prepared for his team. Standing at the entrance, Wei Wang and his team exchanged glances. After a moment of silence, he said, "Let's go back. Everyone worked hard today. Rest early and gather at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning." "Understood," his team members replied in unison. After driving for another 10 minutes, Jin Zuyan parked the car outside a house. Standing outside the gate, Zyro Han smiled and said, "Captain Jin, we will inform everyone about tomorrow's meeting." "Thank you," Jin Zuyan nodded. "Captain Jin, this is what I should do. I will take my leave now. Have a good night," Zyro Han said before he left. When Mo unlocked the gate and locked it again after they entered the yard, not long after, they heard Chin Luzi's voice coming from inside the house. "Everyone, captain and sister-in-law are back." In less than a few minutes, they saw the members coming out to greet them one after another. Zhao Lijai looked at them and noticed a new face, but also didn't see some of the members. As they walked into the house, she asked, "Where are Sister Jiang, Brother Bohai and Brother Qian Feng?" "Sister-in-law, Qian Feng is undergoing a breakthrough process, so Sister Jiang and Brother Bohai are guarding him in the backyard," Zhou Huijian replied. Hearing this, Zhao Lijai frowned and said, "Brother Yan, I will go take a look." Jin Zuyan nodded and said, "Go ahead." It only took her a few minutes to reach the backyard. The moment she saw Chen Qian Feng was enveloped by a big sphere of water, her eyes widened in shock as she said, "It's not good." Before Zhou Huijian could ask what wasn't good, he saw her walk over to the sphere of water and touch it. Seeing this, he said, "Sister-in-law, wait." But before he could stop her, he saw her hand had already gone into the sphere of water and pulled out Chen Qian Feng. The moment he was pulled out, the sphere of water turned into a pool of water and splashed the ground. After she pulled him out, Zhao Lijai quickly checked Chen Qian Feng's breath. When she noticed his weak breathing, she placed both of her palms on his chest. Closing her eyes, she sent her energy into his body. The moment her energy entered, it clashed with a violent energy inside Chen Qian Feng's body. Feeling the blood rushing to her throat, she gritted her teeth and swallowed it back. Focusing her mind, she sent more energy into his body, trying to control the raging energy that was destroying the meridians and injuring the internal organs. Noticing that the situation was not good, Zhou Huijian quickly went to report to his captain. Chapter 268, Dangerous Breakthrough, 2. At this moment, Zhao Lijai had no time to worry about anything else. Chen Qian Feng's condition was critical. Based on the damage inside his body, he must have undergone the process for at least 10 hours or more. When she thought about a similar case in her previous life, she took out a handful of blue-colored crystal cores from her space. The moment Jin Zuyan and the rest of the team arrived in the backyard, they saw her shove a handful of crystal cores into Chen Qian Feng's mouth. "Aitg," Jin Zuyan exclaimed in surprise. He knew how much energy was stored in a crystal core. Even eating one would harm the body, and the chance of survival was only 1%, let alone eating a handful. Zhao Lijai glanced at him and said, "Brother Yan, trust me." After she finished speaking, she held Chen Qian Feng's wrist and used her own energy to guide the energy from the crystal cores to suppress the raging energy. At the same time, she started healing the internal injuries. While everyone didn't know what was going on, they could guess that the situation was bad just from looking at their captain's expression. Although Jin Zuyan was worried about his friend and girlfriend, he didn't dare to disturb her at this moment. One wrong step, and both of them might die from the backlash. Standing 2 meters away from them, he clenched his fists tightly to stop himself from walking over. Under everyone's gazes, Zhao Lijai was fighting against time and trying to snatch Chen Qian Feng's life back from the gates of hell. 15 minutes later, her face turned pale and her body was drenched in cold sweat. Even after using crystal cores and having a huge energy pool, using her energy to control the raging energy and heal the injuries at the same time was a heavy burden on her body. After another 10 minutes, she was finally unable to hold on and spat out a mouthful of blood. Aitg, Jin Zuyan was shocked and rushed over to catch her. Holding his girlfriend's body, he noticed her low body temperature. Without wasting time, he quickly transferred his energy to her. Suddenly, Chen Qian Feng coughed violently as he opened his eyes. Cough, cough, cough. Qian Feng, Zhou Huijian rushed over to check on him. After several coughs, Chen Qianfeng took a sharp breath and looked at everyone in confusion as he asked hoarsely, "What happened to me?" Jiang Lixin squatted beside him and checked his condition. After a few minutes, she said, "Qianfeng, your body is fine, and you have broken through to level 1. Congratulations." Hearing this, Chen Qianfeng was stunned for a moment. During his comatose state, he felt that his life was slipping away when suddenly a strong energy forcefully pulled his consciousness back. As the foreign energy circled inside his body, the pain lessened, and he was finally able to wake up. Feeling that something had happened while he was unconscious, he turned his head only to see his captain holding his sister-in-law with a pale face. "Captain, what's wrong with sister-in-law?" he asked. Jin Zuyin ignored him and focused on transferring his energy. 5 minutes later, Zhao Lijai finally opened her eyes. Seeing this, Jin Zuyin reached out to wipe away the bloodstain on her lips and asked, "Aitg, how are you feeling? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Leaning in her boyfriend's embrace, Zhao Lijai took several deep breaths before she said, "Brother Yan, I'm fine." Jin Zuyin reached out and wiped away her sweat with his fingers before he said, "You are already like this, and are still saying that you are fine." The moment he finished speaking, he held her by the knees and waist. Standing up with her in his arms, he walked toward the house and asked, "Where is my room?" Coming back to his senses, Zyro Kai quickly replied, "The master bedroom on the 2nd floor." Without looking back, Jin Zuyin carried his girlfriend to their room and locked the door. Standing inside the room, he said, "Take me to your space." Zhao Lijai nodded and entered her space with him. Appearing inside the space, Jin Zuyin carried her to the master bedroom and placed her on the lounge chair before he went to fill up the bathtub with warm water and took out a set of clean clothes for her. Watching her boyfriend busying around with a dark face, Zhao Lijai asked, "Brother Yan, why are you angry?" It would have been better if she hadn't asked. The moment she did, Jin Zuyin turned to her and asked back, "Aitg, are you asking because you really don't know?" Feeling that her boyfriend was really angry this time, Zhao Lijai decided to shut up and let him carry her to take a bath. Normally, when a couple takes a bath together, they would venture into the yellow area. But at this moment, Jin Zuyin was too angry to think about doing something naughty with his girlfriend. While he was fully dressed, Zhao Lijai was naked as she sat in the bathtub. For someone who had experienced so many years in the apocalypse, she no longer had the naivety of a young girl. Since the two of them were in a relationship, she didn't mind him looking at her body. She let him wash and scrub her body without saying a word. While he was clearly angry, his movements were still gentle, as if he was afraid of hurting her. After Jin Zuyin finished giving his girlfriend a bath and changing her clothes, most of his anger was gone. As they sat on the couch looking at each other, he let out a long sigh and pulled her into his embrace. With his face buried in her neck, he said hoarsely, "Aitg, you scared me to death." His voice was filled with grievance like a bullied little wife. Feeling his trembling arms around her body, Zhao Lijai finally realized why he was so angry. Reaching out, she hugged him and said, "Brother Yan, I'm sorry for scaring you." Chapter 269, Horrifying Punishment, 1. Jin Zuyin went silent for a long time before he said, "Aitg, no matter how important my friends are to me, you are the most important. I don't want you to put yourself in danger for them. Aitg, I can live without them, but without you I will die, so please don't do this to me anymore. My heart can't take it," he added softly. Hearing this, Zhao Lijai was stunned and didn't know what to say. In the end, she only hugged him tighter and said nothing. When he didn't get her answer, Jin Zuyin didn't care. For him, he would do anything to ensure that she stayed alive, safe, and sound. Even if he had to use his life in exchange for hers, he would do it without hesitation. So whether she agreed or not was not a problem. As they hugged, Zhao Lijai felt sleepy. Being embraced by his warm body, she felt safe and slowly drifted into a deep slumber. 5 minutes later, Jin Zuyin felt the body in his arms soften, and his girlfriend was no longer hugging him back. Instead, she leaned on him and snuggled like a small kitten. Feeling her warm breath on his neck, he lifted his head only to see her fast asleep in his embrace. Seeing her peaceful expression, he smiled and leaned down to give her a light kiss. After gently carrying her to the bed and covering her with a thin blanket, he went to take a shower. While his girlfriend was sleeping, he walked around the space. Besides the pond and farmland near the house, the rest of the area was vast grassland. He checked the fruit trees planted not far from the house and saw that the fruits were mature and ready for harvest. Unsure if they would rot if not picked, he decided to help his girlfriend harvest them. Outside the space, the Phantom team members were unaware of Zhao Lijai's condition. They wanted to ask, but they were also afraid of disturbing their captain. What if he was treating her? Because of this concern, they could only wait in the living room. Everyone sat solemnly, each lost in their own thoughts. After a long silence, Zhou Huajian finally asked, Qianfeng, what exactly happened to you? Hearing this question, Chen Qianfeng shook his head and replied, I'm not sure either. I only remember that my energy went out of control when I called for you. After that, I don't remember anything. Brother Qianfeng, we thought you underwent a breakthrough process. Is that not true? Zyro Kai asked with doubts. At that moment, Jiang Lixin said, Qianfeng indeed underwent a breakthrough. He is a level 1 ability user now. Chen Qianfeng thought for a moment and replied, I don't know what's going on either. I only know that after I lost consciousness, I felt cold and in pain for a long time before a surge of unknown energy entered my body and controlled the energy that had gone out of control. Upon hearing this, Feng Yun said, that must have been sister-in-law's energy. When we arrived in the backyard, we saw her feeding you crystal cores and holding your wrist. Hearing this, Chen Qianfeng lowered his head and said with guilt, it's because she was saving me that my sister-in-law was injured. Sitting beside him, Qin Luzi patted his shoulder and said, since you owe your life to our sister-in-law, then you have to repay her kindness. Chen Qianfeng nodded and said, Brother Luzi, I understand. I will definitely protect her. The moment he finished his words, Li Kixuan let out a chuckle and said, Brother, you shouldn't say those words in front of the captain, or you will get into trouble. Everyone nodded in agreement the moment they heard his comment. They waited another 15 minutes, but there was still no sign of Jin Zuyan or Zhao Lijai coming out of their bedroom. Checking his watch, Zhang Yuan said, all right, it's no use waiting here. The captain will take care of his girlfriend. Since everyone's here, let's introduce ourselves to the new members. Today, we recruited another person for our research team, Mo Junji. Mo Junji stood up and said, hello, everyone. When they saw his handsome face, Yin Yusheng clicked his tongue and said, Vice Captain, did our team start recruiting based on looks? Both new members are above average in that department. Hearing this, Li Kixuan smiled at him and replied, Brother, you are overpraising. Yin Yusheng rolled his eyes in his mind as he thought, another shameless member. Gao Bohai glanced at him and said casually, Yusheng, if you are worried you will look ugly standing beside them, just stand next to me. I'm not as good looking as you. With me around, you can boost your face value. Yin Yusheng's face darkened at his words and said, Brother Bohai, thank you for your offer, but I don't need it. He looked at the new members and added, we don't know their abilities yet, so isn't it normal to be skeptical? Well, I don't have any ability, and I also have a strange illness, but I believe my value lies in my brain, not my face. I can help the team do research or treat patients, Mo Junji replied with a smile. Qin Luzi glanced at him with a knowing look. He could lie to everyone else, but not to him. The flickering blue dots on his map showed that both new members were ability users, and possibly strong ones. After meeting 5 people with blue dots, he guessed that a blue dot might represent something regarding their ability. His captain's black flame was clearly a mutated fire-type ability. His sister-in-law's water could change into ice, and could be included as a mutated water type. Pei Yijin's lightning was a different color from Li Sikai's. He had compared the two and noticed that while Chen Ji, Shen Jinj, Li Sikai, and Yin Yusheng's green dots showed signs of changing color, it wasn't very visible. Chapter 270, Horrifying Punishment, 2. At the moment, the dots representing the 4 of them on his map were a soft cyan, a color between green and blue. Unlike them, Mo Junji and Li Kixuan's dots were clearly blue. Based on this, he was 40% sure blue meant a mutated ability. While he was lost in thought, the others had already introduced themselves. All right, we have a lot to do tomorrow. Let's eat dinner and rest, Zhang Yuan said. Everyone nodded and quickly prepared a simple meal. While it was called simple, they had steamed rice, a large pot of vegetable and pork stew, a big plate of scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and grilled sausages. Sitting at the table, Mo Junji looked at the food and asked, Brother, is it fine to eat this much in one sitting? Won't our supplies run out? Noticing his concern, Feng Yun replied, Don't worry, our team has enough to last 2 years. Even if you eat more, we can afford to feed you. Zhang Yuan nodded and added, Our team doesn't pay salaries, but sister-in-law gives us personal supplies and crystal cores every few days. If you run out, just inform her and she will give you more. Hearing this, Li Kixuan raised an eyebrow and asked, "Is that why all the crystal cores were given to her?" Zyro Kai nodded and replied, "Even though she holds the crystal cores, she is very generous." He pulled out a small cloth bag from his pocket and placed it on the table. "These are crystals given by my sister-in-law to me. Even when I still had some left, she gave me more. Now I have about 300. "I have about that much too," Feng Yun added. "Same here," Li Sikai nodded. Li Kixuan smiled meaningfully and said, "No wonder she gave me a backpack full of supplies and crystals this morning. Turns out everyone gets one. I thought I was special." Everyone sucked in a sharp breath and stared at him the moment they heard his words. The room went silent. A few minutes later, Shen Jinj finally said, "Brother, you are very bold." "What do you mean by that?" Li Kixuan asked, confused. "Brother, Zhao Lijai is our captain's girlfriend. You should forget any inappropriate thoughts. If the captain finds out, you will be dead," Zhou Huajian said sincerely. "It's that bad?" Mo Junji asked. Zyro Kai nodded quickly and whispered, "Worse. I didn't realize how possessive our captain was before, and chatted with sister-in-law for 10 minutes once. We are just chatting, but when I met the captain's gaze, I knew I was doomed." "What happened next?" Chen Kai and Feng asked. "Captain didn't say anything, but since then, I'm no longer getting candies or chocolate during supplies distribution, while everyone else gets. Only recently has that changed," Zyro Kai said with a long sigh. "You don't know the pain of watching your favorite snacks but couldn't get any. I would rather run 50 kilometers with a heavy load," he added with a long sigh. Hearing this, Mo Junji looked horrified, while Li Kixuan asked curiously, "Zyro Kai, aren't you a space-type ability user? Can't you just take supplies from your space and eat as you wish?" Zyro Kai shook his head and said, "Even though Brother Feng Yun and I manage the team's supplies, we only store essential items like food, water, medicine, and clothes due to the limited space. Only our sister-in-law collects snacks, candies, and other miscellaneous things." At those words, Li Kixuan's eyes flashed with surprise. He nodded casually, pretending not to notice anything unusual, but inwardly he was thinking about the possibility that Zhao Lijai's space might be much larger than the others. After a moment of silence, Chen Kai and Feng muttered, "Good thing Captain didn't hear what I said earlier, or I would be the next Zyro Kai. I can't live without my spicy strips." Zhang Yuan coughed when he heard this and said, "All right, let's eat before the food gets cold." The moment he said this, everyone stopped discussing their captain's punishment and focused on eating. Li Kixuan thought that since there was so much food, there was no need to rush. But reality hit hard. He had barely picked some dishes when, looking up, half the food was already gone. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he threw elegance to the wind and joined the food battle. While everyone was fighting for the eggs and sausages, Mo Junji quietly filled his bowl with rice for the third time. As he devoured his steamed rice, he had already eaten 2 bowls of the vegetable and pork stew. The eggs and sausages were too far, and reaching for them would waste time. Rather than losing his rice chasing after a chicken, he focused on the stew in front of him. Thanks to his strategy, he ate the most. After the meal, everyone helped wash the dishes before heading to their rooms for rest. At midnight, Zhao Lijai finally woke up from her sleep. After sitting for a while, she realized that she was inside her space. Recalling the issue with the oxygen level, she quickly opened her space's information panel. After reading the data for a while, she let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the current oxygen production rate was higher than the consumption rate. It wouldn't be a problem for her and her boyfriend to stay in her space for an extended period. She sat on the bed for a moment before getting up to wash her face. Coming down from the second floor, she caught the fragrant aroma of chicken soup. Curious, she walked to the kitchen and saw her boyfriend cooking. He was still wearing his clothes from the morning, but there was an apron tied around his waist. Looking at his clean clothes, she figured he had probably washed them while she was sleeping. Noticing her footsteps, Jin Zuyan turned and said, "Ajai, I made chicken soup with mushrooms and some side dishes. I wasn't sure what you liked to eat, so I made a few for you to try." Chapter 271, The Last Hope of Humanity, 1. Hearing her boyfriend's words, Zhao Lijai looked at the countertop and saw several dishes. Besides the chicken soup boiling on the stove, there was a plate of braised eggplants, a bowl of fruit salad, and a bowl of steamed egg. Seeing this, she walked over and hugged him from behind, then said, "I like everything you cook." Jin Zuyan's mood soared as soon as he heard that. After turning off the stove, he turned around to hug her and said, Aitg, let's eat first.
Okay.
The two of them brought the dishes to the dining room and had a meal together. After their visit to the shopping mall, Aitg had collected lots of household items and furniture. Now, her house was no longer empty and was nicely decorated. After eating, she took his hand and teleported to the area where she raised her animals. Pointing at the animals running on the grassland, she said, Brother Yan, I raised the mutated animals in this area. Jin Zuyin looked at the animals and asked, Aitg, you didn't put them in pens. Won't they go wild and ruin your crops? Brother Yan, I put a barrier around this area, so they can't leave the perimeter, Aitg replied confidently. Hearing this, Jin Zuyin sighed and said, Aitg, you are so wonderful. With your space and water-type ability, you don't even need me. You can live well on your own. The moment he said that, Aitg was taken aback. She looked up and saw the dejected expression on his face. Feeling heartache for him, she held his arm and said, Brother Yan, what nonsense are you saying? I need you. Jin Zuyin glanced at her and asked, Do you really need me? Of course, Aitg replied without hesitation. Seeing her response, Jin Zuyin's heart raced, though his expression remained sad and pitiful. He let out a long sigh and said, Now that you have met your vice-captain again, soon you will care more about him than me. This time Aitg felt angry and said with a frown, Brother Yan, nothing happened between me and my vice-captain in my previous life, and there won't be anything in this life. You are my boyfriend. Since I chose to be with you, my heart and loyalty are with you. If you keep talking like this, I won't care about you anymore, she added with a snort. Jin Zuyin knew when to stop and didn't push his luck further. He had heard what he wanted to hear, so he pulled her into his arms and said, Okay, I won't say those things anymore. Aitg, don't be angry with me, I'm sorry. Aitg stayed in his arms but still muttered, You are annoying. Jin Zuyin chuckled and replied, I'm annoying. After the tour of Aitg's space, Jin Zuyin finally understood how vast and unique his girlfriend's space truly was. The medicinal herbs growing on the grassland were thriving, even though they weren't planted in the black soil. The pond near the house was the only source of water in the space, yet it seemed inexhaustible. What's more, he finally realized why his girlfriend's water sometimes tastes different. Checking the time on his watch, Jin Zuyin said, Aitg, it's almost dawn. We should head out now. We still have a meeting at 8 o'clock with Wei Wang and his team. Aitg nodded and said, Brother Yan, if you want to take a shower in the future, just let me know. I will bring you in.
Okay.
The two of them left the space and reappeared in the bedroom. Seeing this, Jin Zuyin realized that the place they reappeared was the same as where they had entered. Even so, her space was a heaven-defying ability that could save her life in an emergency. That thought gave him a deep sense of reassurance. They took a short nap before waking up at 6:30 and joining their team members for breakfast. The moment they came down from the second floor, Chen Qianfeng walked over and asked, Sister-in-law, how are you feeling? Before Aitg could respond, Jin Zuyin answered, Aitg is fine now, don't worry, how about you? Captain, I'm in great condition, Chen Qianfeng replied. Then he turned to Aitg and said, Sister-in-law, thank you for saving my life. Aitg smiled and replied, You are Brother Yan's brother. It's only right for me to save my brother-in-law. The moment she said that, Jin Zuyin gently squeezed her hand, reminding her of his words from the day before. Chen Qianfeng noticed the subtle flirtatious glances exchanged between the two. Since they were flirting, it was clear she was doing just fine, so he went to fill the water tank and no longer bother the couple. As they walked into the living room, Chin Luzi, sitting on the couch, looked at them thoughtfully. Yesterday, he noticed the blue dots representing his captain and sister-in-law disappear, not long after they entered the bedroom. They didn't reappear until just before dawn. Their disappearance reminded him of what had happened in the market area. Since the cause wasn't the location, the only logical explanation was the people, and between the two, only his sister-in-law possessed a space-type ability. Even though it seemed illogical, witnessing this phenomenon twice made him more open-minded. The conclusion he reached after a night of thinking was that living beings could enter her space. Now that he accepted that possibility, he suspected that her space was much larger than she claimed. Otherwise, how could she have stored so many supplies before? During their trip to the shopping mall, she had clearly taken everything, leaving nothing behind. Thinking of this, a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. It was fortunate she was on their side. If she were an enemy, she would be a major headache. While he was lost in thought, Zhao Lijai noticed Jiang Lixin holding Mo Junji's wrist when she reached the living room. A soft light enveloped his body, indicating that he was being healed.
And